Imagine trying to steal the most guarded, priceless treasure on Earth. Now, imagine trying to do it armed with nothing but a disguise, a wooden mallet, and just a ridiculous amount of nerve. Well, that's exactly the story of Thomas Blood, an Irish adventurer who in 1671 came shockingly close to walking right out of the Tower of London with the English crown jewels. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most audacious, bizarre, and frankly unbelievable true crimes in history.
So how do you even steal the crown jewels? Your mind probably goes straight to complex, Hollywood-style heists, right? Explosives, a small army of mercenaries, laser grids. But no, the truth of how Thomas Blood actually breached the Tower of London is a terrifying masterclass in the devastating power of psychological manipulation. This entire explainer is essentially an investigation into how human trust can be completely weaponized.
But first, to really grasp the massive stakes of this heist, we need to talk about this number. 12,185 pounds. That was the staggering cost to mint the newly restored royal regalia back in 1661. For context, after the execution of Charles I, Oliver Cromwell basically melted down or sold off all the original medieval jewels. So when King Charles II finally got the throne back, he commissioned a brand new set, including St. Edward's crown and the royal orb. In today's money, we are literally talking billions. Billions. These weren't just shiny objects, they were the ultimate physical symbols of restored royal power.
Okay, so how do you pull off the ultimate inside job? Well, the target was the basement of the Martin Tower. But the primary obstacle standing in Blood's way actually wasn't a wall of heavily armed guards. It was a 77-year-old man. The keeper of the jewels, Talbot Edwards, lived with his family right above the basement where these priceless jewels were kept, behind a surprisingly simple metal grill. Edwards was even allowed to show the jewels to the public for a small viewing fee.
And this setup brilliantly illustrates the concept of social engineering. Thomas Blood knew that a frontal physical assault on the Tower of London would be a complete suicide mission, so he bypassed the outer guards entirely. He targeted this isolated, kind-hearted old man instead. He didn't use brute force to break in, he used pure deception to get invited in.
Let's look at the anatomy of this con, because this was absolutely not a quick smash and grab. This was an agonizingly slow, meticulously crafted psychological long con designed to completely lower the old man's defenses and set the stage for the ultimate betrayal.
Blood methodically broke down the jewel keeper's defenses step by step. Step 1, Blood dresses up as a parson. He calls himself Dr. Iloff, instantly giving off this vibe of trustworthy moral authority. Step 2, during a visit, a female accomplice pretending to be his wife fakes a sudden, violent stomachache. Naturally, the Edwards family takes them into their private living quarters to rest. Brilliant, right? Step 3. A few days later, our fake parson comes back with a thank you gift, 4 pairs of white gloves for Mrs. Edwards. And then, Step 4. This is the cruelest manipulation of the whole thing. Blood proposes a marriage between his supposedly wealthy nephew, who was actually his own son, and Edward's daughter. He completely exploited this 77-year-old man's simple desire to secure a good, comfortable future for his child. Which brings us to the climax, chaos, in the jewel house. It's May 9, 1671, the very morning the two families are supposed to meet for this fake betrothal. But the second Talbot Edwards unlocks that vault for this seemingly friendly family, the trap snaps shut. The tone violently shifts. Imagine the absolute terror for Edwards. Blood brutally bludgeons the poor old man with a wooden mallet, stabs him in the stomach with a sword, and tightly gags him.
What's really wild here is the stark contrast between that incredibly slick, careful social con we just talked about and the absolute panicked, crude reality of the actual robbery. I mean, just look at these bizarre hiding methods. To smuggle out the priceless St. Edward's crown, Blood literally took his wooden mallet and started smashing it flat so he could just shove it under his clergyman's cloak. Another gang member grabbed the heavy, gem-encrusted royal orb and just stuffed it down his breeches. And the scepter with the dove? It was too long to hide, so Blood's son literally tried to saw it in half right there on the spot. It was just pure destructive panic.
And that panic perfectly sets up our next phase, the Great Escape. Because right in the middle of this violent, bizarre scene, the absolute last person Thomas Blood ever wanted to see suddenly walks through the door. Wythe Edwards, Talbot's son, had unexpectedly just arrived home from military service in Flanders. Talk about the worst possible timing for a heist.
Wythe's sudden arrival completely disrupts the thieves.
And miraculously, despite being bludgeoned and stabbed, 77-year-old Talbot Edwards heroically manages to pull the gag out of his mouth and screams, "Murder! Treason!" The alarm is officially sounded, the gang drops the half-sawn scepter and just bolts. A frantic chase erupts through the Tower of London, with Blood actually firing a pistol at the pursuing guards as he scrambles toward the Iron Gate to escape.
But spoiler alert, he didn't make it. He was captured right near the exit by Captain Martin Beckman. And yet Blood's ego was completely untouched. Caught red-handed, literally holding the smashed crown jewels, he proudly declared, "It was a gallant attempt, but it was for a crown." The sheer audacity is incredible. He then flat out refused to speak to anyone, demanding that he would answer to nobody but the king himself.
Which brings us to perhaps the craziest twist of this whole story. Was he actually the king's secret agent? Because look, in the 17th century, committing high treason and trying to steal the crown jewels equals a gruesome public execution. That was an absolute guarantee. But that is not what happened to Thomas Blood.
Instead of the executioner's block, King Charles II granted him a full royal pardon. Wait, it gets crazier. He didn't just pardon him. The king gave Blood Irish lands that generated an income of £500 a year. That was an absolute fortune back then. Blood essentially became a fixture at the royal court. And this right here is the central mystery of our true crime profile today. Why on earth would you reward the man who just tried to steal your crown?
To figure that out, we have to look really closely at Blood's personality. We have this amazing contemporary quote from the Diary of John Evelyn that builds a fascinating psychological profile. Evelyn notes Blood's false countenance, describing him as very well-spoken and dangerously insinuating. Evelyn basically pegged him as a chameleon. And he was. Blood had fought for Parliament, fought for the king, posed as a doctor, posed as a priest. The man was a master manipulator through and through. And we see that manipulation perfectly in action during his private interrogation with King Charles II. Blood totally turned on the famous Irish charm. He brazenly told the king the jewels weren't even worth the £100,000 they were valued at. He lowballed them, claiming they were only worth about $6,000. And Charles, well, he seemed highly amused by this sheer audacity. When the king finally asked what Blood would do if his life were spared, Blood just delivered this perfect, humble line: "I would endeavor to deserve it, sire."
So, what's the real story here? Was he a public villain or a secret government asset? We have two main theories. On one hand, Charles II was known to have a soft spot for bold scoundrels. Maybe he was just genuinely amused by a kindred rogue spirit and pardoned him purely for his sheer audacity. But on the other hand, a lot of historians strongly suspect Blood was actually a highly effective government spy. You see, Blood had deep connections to radical, underground anti-royalist groups. The Crown probably realized that a guy with Blood's unique skill set, the disguises, the social engineering, the infiltration, was way more valuable alive, keeping tabs on the king's enemies, than dead on a scaffold. Which leaves us with this incredible lingering question. Did Charles II pardon a thief out of sheer amusement, or was he secretly paying a master spy? Think about it. Was this entire chaotic, violent jewel heist actually a desperate, high-stakes gamble by a ruined man, specifically designed to prove his worth and secure a government pension? I mean, the audacity it takes to weaponize a sweet old man's trust, smash a priceless crown with a wooden mallet, and somehow talk your way into a royal fortune is just mind-blowing. I'll leave you to investigate the sources further and decide for yourself.